Welcome to Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. Today I have a special guest, my mother-in-law, Jackie. Welcome, Jackie. Say hello.
Thank you. Hi, Mark.
Hi,
Thanks.
Jackie. I'm glad you can make it. How are things going?
I think they're going well.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you can make it. My understanding is that you have some information back from the good old days, I'll say. How about that?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
a
good old
way to put
days.
it. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, you've been, you've had a lot of knowledge. You go way back to World War II.
Mhm.
That my understanding is that you have some information growing up in that age.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I didn't grow up back then, so I'd really like to hear the stories, pertaining to you and all that. There was a lot going on back then.
That's what I was sat down and I tried to think of all the differences because I was just a little girl at that time. But there was a lot of history, a lot of things. And so I thought, well, that's what we could talk about today.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, wow. I mean, the knowledge just from the neighborhood that you grew up in. I don't think it was that affluent back then. I mean, you had some neighbors, but, there was, blue collar, still working kind of people?
Yep. And we had a small town, and most of the people worked in a mill, but they were from all parts of Europe. Some spoke Greek language, it was all the Hungarians. So there they had the different bars. They had same way in Roscoe, the next town. And we had the railroad tracks come through. And I remember my mother saying how happy she was when the steel mill came in at Ellenport.
Oh, wow. So which part did you live in? Like, where did you live in?
Well, I lived in 3 different parts. First on Railroad Street when I was a little girl. And I learned to spell from the railroad cars because they were divided. It said Pennsylvania, it said West Virginia. So I learned to spell our state, Pennsylvania, P-E-N. That was one section of the railroad car. Then N-S-Y, then L-V-A, then N-I-A. So that's how I learned to spell.
Wow. So this was the city of Stockdale?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you lived different areas in Stockdale, or did you go to different cities?
No, we just lived in Stockdale, but my parents were saving money to build a house. So we rented. And we rented this little house in the back. And when the owner lived in the big house and he wanted to bring over some of his family from Greece, then we had to look for a new house because that's what happened back then. There were no rules. If you wanted to put the people out and bring your family in, you could do that. So then we had to move down by the river. There was a cute little house down there.
Wow.
So then I learned to spell some more from the boats that went by. It was Duquesne, Clairton. It was D-U-Q-U-E-S. Let's see, where was it? How that was. Anyway, then another, D-U-Q-U-E-S and then N-E. So I said to my dad, I learned how to spell a new word. It's Duquesne. And he said, no, that's pronounced Duquesne. So there was
Duquesne, yeah. Duquesne, I think, still around these days. I hear that on the radio a lot. A lot of people say Duquesne. In fact...
I think it's a beer, too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, in fact, a friend of mine, a manager I work with, he had a Duquesne shirt on today. In fact, I said that to him, and he looked at me like, Duquesne? So not everyone knows the Duquesne. They just know it as Duquesne, and that's it.
Right.
But I think that was interesting. What you says was the population was so heavy back then that you actually had to move out of that area?
Well, there were... Some people owned their homes, but I really loved living there. But it was a scary time because we had air raids and my mother had blinds that were dark on one side and light in the house, like tan, but the outside. So when the air raids were coming, then my mother had only a little light on in the house and you pulled the blinds all down because see, the Japanese and the Germans, they wanted to attack our steel mills all the way down up Monongahela River to Pittsburgh. So we would have these air raids because you never knew if you were going to be attacked. And for just being like 4 years old, it was scary.
Yeah, I do remember that. Growing up as a kid, I remember I think Pittsburgh or just the steel mills in general was on the map for to be bombed, to be the main bomb, because that'd be it for the rest of the country. No more steel for the rest of the country. So I do remember as a kid thinking that if they bombed Pittsburgh, that there'd be no more steel for the rest of the country. So I do remember that being very high on the list. So yeah, that does bring back some memories. But wow, so with all the population going on back then, I'm guessing it wasn't just your house that would turn the blinds. I'm sure your neighbors and everyone else.
Yes, everybody had it.
Yeah.
And then they would blow this siren, and that scared me because I was so little. So I would sit.
Where would the siren come from?
From the fire hall, and they would blow the siren.
Stockton.
In Stockdale. I'm sure they did Roscoe also, but that's what I remember was Stockdale. And we had a teacher that lived next door, and she taught me how to read before I even went to first grade. So it was nice growing up back then because people didn't have much, and so they were friendly and they were outside a lot. There was no air conditioning or anything, and people had big porches, and you saw people. Now today, you have everything in your house that you need, so you don't see anyone. And people get in their cars, they go somewhere. But it's just different. It's just a different way of living.
So how big would you say the classes were that you were in school? Were they large classes or were they smaller because there was a lot of schools around the areas?
Yeah, that we had our own Stockdale school. Roscoe was a bigger community, so they had a bigger school.
So you just had one school?
In each town, one in Ellenport,
okay.
One elementary school. And you had 2 grades in a room because you didn't have that many children.
Oh, okay.
But it's just, there were so many different languages too, because you'd hear people talking in their native tongue and they didn't want to lose that. So, you walked around in the town, and later when my brother and I had a paper route, then we went all over the town, and some people, they forget and they start to talk in their foreign language, and I couldn't understand them.
So the ones talking in foreign language, they came like out of the area just to work in the mill. Yeah,
they came mostly.
So they weren't originally they weren't from your area. They came in just to work at the mill. Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah.
What type of languages do you remember? Was it like Russian, German?
Greek, Italian, Slovak, mostly European countries.
Oh, okay.
And
wow, that is interesting. And that was you were still in your teenage years?
No, I was still like 4 or 5 years old. I'm trying to think when I was. I wanted to tell you too that there were a lot of people that had dogs. Not like you have dogs in the house today, but you had dog houses, and the dogs were outside. And we had a dog named Brownie, and I loved that little. When she would have pups, there was a Snowball. I called it Snowball. It was a white little puppy, and I think that our dog had 5 in the litter, and I was in first grade, so I went to school. And when I came home, I was going to play with Snowball. And my dad said, "I'm sorry, but I found somebody who wanted a puppy, and I gave it away." And I said, "But you couldn't have done that. Not my little Snowball."
Oh my!
He said, "Don't cry. Brownie will have more pups." And it was just so different back then. Dogs walked on the street, but I felt safe.
No leashes.
No,
and,
nothing.
No pit bull attacks and stuff like that nowadays.
No.
Oh my! Wow! Yeah, that was a different time. I mean, now you always turn on the news and you hear, somebody getting attacked by this dog, by that dog, and wow, that's very interesting. And did you ever get your house did it have a fence on it? No.
We just had like a little dog house in the back, and most people had a dog house. Then I wanted to tell you about the childhood diseases. There were no shots back then, so everybody got the measles. Everybody got the whooping cough. Everybody got the chicken pox. And another fad was everybody, when you were around 6, 7, you got your tonsils out because the mill paid for it. So the doctor,
whether you needed it or not, they took it out.
My brother needed them out, but then the doctor said, "I'll just do her too."
Oh,
And I always
really?
had sore throats afterwards.
Wow. No, I didn't know that. Geez, so that was
Yeah.
a benefit of working in the mill, huh?
Yeah.
Uh,
But I wanted to go back to the war from 1941 to 1945. There were so many things that were rationed. Like my brother was allowed, we had stamps. My brother was allowed to get a pair of shoes. And then like the next 4 months that we got new stamps and I could get a pair of shoes.
oh,
And the same way with food, you could very seldom get sugar. And we didn't have the desserts all the time. We had birthday cakes.
hmm.
And by second grade, I was writing letters to my uncles. Well, two were in the Navy, one was in the Army. And they were all in the Pacific War, the war in the Pacific. And two of my uncles were bakers. So that's what they did in the Army. They didn't really do combat. They baked.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, hey, you need a cook in the Army, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on. Mr. Cunningham from Happy Days was in the Army. He was a cook in the Army.
There you go.
So did you have a garden? At,
Oh, my
the house?
dad.
Oh, you
yeah.
did? Okay.
Uh-huh. But then when we moved by the river, we had a big garden. I mean, that land there, it was a cute little house, and it was nice in the summer. We only lived there 1 year because of the spring floods.
Oh,
That was, I loved sitting on the bank, watching the boats go by, and my brother and I would go down and play on the shore in the sand and all that. Well, then the spring flood came, and my dad worked midnight shift, and we woke up, and lo and behold, our house, our dear sweet little house, vacation home, was in the river. The river had engulfed our house.
oh,
So my dad came home in a rowboat. He had to get us out of the house. Yeah.
wow.
And but then the land was so fertile from being flooded that he had this beautiful garden afterwards.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
After the water receded. Beautiful garden. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And what about, like, when was that? What age were you then?
I know how old I was. I was 7. And or 7. And that spring was when Franklin Roosevelt, our president, died. My mother was out hanging clothes. That's another thing. People hung clothes outside to dry. And the neighbor came over, and she said, I could see them talking, and then they were hugging each other. And it was like devastating that our president died, and we were at war.
Did you know it was happening, or you didn't?
Yeah,
Oh,
no, my mother told me then. She called me over, and she said, the president died. I said, what are we going to do? What do we do?
I mean, times were different back then. You didn't have social media like you do now, where it comes to your phone and, like President Reagan got shot or something happened.
Right,
Back then,
right.
it was word of mouth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's basically clothesline talk.
Yeah, but that's what it was.
Jeez.
But then the war was over, and my dad got a house up on the street, and this is interesting too, because we moved right next to the Nazarene church, and since we went to the Catholic church, we weren't allowed to go to the church, but I loved that church because I would go upstairs. Our stairway was on that side, and we had a window to top, so I would sit up there on the steps, open the window, and I'd listen to people sing their hymns, like Rock of Ages. I knew all these hymns. And the worst part was in the summer, they had a vacation Bible school, and the girls in my class, they all went.
And you couldn't go?
No, I wasn't allowed to go because I was the only Catholic. And to this day, I like those people.
Yeah.
And they were, when I delivered the newspapers too, and I went to their houses, they were always so nice. And I said, why couldn't we all be friends?
Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't that you weren't allowed. Would they not let you in?
No, they would, but my mother said, no, Catholics don't. And that's the way it was then. I mean,
very segregated way.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I loved their music.
Huh.
But anyway, let me see. So then we got the house up on the street, and that was where I think I was 8 then. And but I wanted to mention about the houses too. I mean, people had a front porch and a back porch.
Yeah.
And no air conditioning or anything. So when the sun was over here, you sat on the other porch. And then when the sun moved for the evening, then you went on the other porch. And we kept them clean, and my mother put rugs down on the porch. And I mean, it was part of your living.
So did you watch TV back then, or was it?
No, we listened to the radio.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, my brother and I listened to, I forget now. Oh, the squeaky door or some Inner Sanctum, and they had sound effects.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, I don't remember that. Wow. So you had one brother, Walt.
He was 3 years older than me.
Oh, okay.
And, but when we moved up on the street, that's when we got the paper route. And it was too much for him. We had bicycles, so I took half of the route, and he took the other half.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned a lot, too, about people. People are genuinely good people.
So was this a daily route, or was this just a week?
Daily and Sunday.
And how long would that take you?
Well, we walked to school. We walked home for lunch. Then we walked back because we had school right in our town.
Oh, yeah.
And then when we came home, I would get the papers were delivered to our house, and then my brother separated them, and then we sometimes folded them all and put them in you had a newspaper bag.
Like a sack, and you deliver after school?
Mm-hmm. And I put it on my bicycle, and I'd go.
Oh.
And I always felt safe, and I had to cross the railroad tracks, and if there were cars in, my dad taught me how to climb up and down the other side.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
can I ask you how much you made?
Oh yeah, let's see. Yeah, the paper, I think the daily paper was 4 cents, and the Sunday paper was 12.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. Boy, times have changed now, huh?
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
What can you get for 4 cents now, huh?
But you know what? Back then, because communication wasn't like it is today, people actually looked forward to
I believe it.
bringing
Yeah.
the paper.
I believe it.
And everybody was so nice to me all the time. And I was, one time, though, there was a loose dog, and it bit my upper leg.
Oh.
But not a lot.
Yeah.
And that scared me a little bit. But I had another little dog, and I called him Wags. And he would wait for me, and he would go with me all around to the front street and back, and it was so cute. And then when we got down by the Sokol Club, I'd say, okay, Wags, I don't know what his name was. That's what I called him.
Yeah.
I said, you have to go home. And he'd go back. And ironically enough, that's the house next to where our grandson bought his home.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we went for the birthday party, and I said, well, that's where Wags lives.
So you come full circle. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Gee. Now, I noticed you said Sokol's Club. So there was I remember Sokol's Club in Monessen. So there was a Sokol's Club in Stockdale?
Mm-hmm. And I would go in, put the paper on the bar, and I thought that was cool.
Oh, yeah? What did you see when you went in there? Was it...
a couple guys playing cards.
Yeah.
And then when televisions first came out, of course, the bars got the televisions first. So my dad took my brother and I. We'd get a bottle of pop, and we'd watch whatever was on the television.
Some drinking was going on. And,
it was early afternoon, so that's when he took us. Yeah, but it was just such a great time. I mean, we had sacrifice, but we had happy times. And we didn't have a car, so we walked to Roscoe to the movie theater. We walked to Roscoe, Elko it was, to our church. And then you walk back home. Now, if it rained or snowed, then we would ride the streetcar.
It's funny how you make do with what you have. Like nowadays, you get around and you take it for granted. You go here, you go there, because you just assume your car is going to start and it's going to take you there.
Right.
Back then, there was a chance that, you might not make it there because of the weather. Or you might not have time to go there. Or for whatever reason, you might not get there. So times back then you couldn't take for granted. Yeah, that's definitely a different era, for sure. Wow. I mean, that's really going back in the day. So you're still at a teenager, or are you still preteen?
We had a paper route from the time I was 8 till I was 13, I think.
Okay.
Well, and then my brother was 3 years older, so he didn't. Once he started high school, I think when I was 11, I took over the whole town.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That must have took a couple extra hours.
Yeah, a little bit more money, But my mother made me put it all in the bank. So
Oh, she
I
did.
think
She
I
wouldn't
was-
let you spend it.
I think I was allowed to have 50 cents or
Oh
something.
wow, I know somebody like that.
Puts everything in a bank.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, that's good. I mean, keep the money in the bank. What would you have spent it on anyway, right? The movies. What'd you have back then? Was there a theater in town?
In Roscoe, and we used to walk up there every Sunday night. That was our entertainment.
What was the name of it?
Oh, gee. Oh,
I'm putting you on the spot.
You asked me a hard question,
I know.
now, Mark. Let me see. It'll probably come to me. But they had the news first of all, and I remember during the war they would show the soldiers fighting,
Yeah.
and I would sit there and say, "I'm so glad I'm a girl. Thank
Oh,
you,
yeah.
God. I'm so glad I'm
Yeah.
a girl. I could never do that because I didn't like to be in
Yeah.
tight spots."
So Walt, your brother Walt, was never enlisted or never got drafted. Is that right?
No, he was in for 2 years.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, but that was after he graduated high school. He went into the service.
Oh, okay. Because I know he was a teacher back then, so he must have
Mhm.
went to college and then.
And when he came out of the service, he went to college.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
then he was his first job in Ohio, or did he work
Mhm.
in Pennsylvania?
No, Cleveland. He couldn't get a job around here, and they were offering jobs in Cleveland. And he went out there and he loved it. He was in an Italian section of the town of the
Oh.
city of Cleveland.
Yeah.
And then when they came along in the 50s and they integrated the schools,
Yeah.
and he got students from like another section, and then the students that he had, they had to be bused, and it was a big mix up.
Almost like inner city students,
yeah,
you
it
think?
was inner city,
Oh.
and they would say to him, they'd come back home after they went to the new school, and they'd see him like walking out to the parking lot or something, and they would say, "We don't like where we go to school. We liked it here."
Oh,
And there were a lot of black students,
yeah.
and so they had to be integrated, but they didn't really want to be. They
Yeah.
wanted to go where they lived.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
that's
it.
understandable. I
Yeah.
mean, that was back in the day where you had choices, but not really. You know what I mean? You had to follow suit with everyone else.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to say this too, Mark. When I was 8 years old, girls always wore dresses everywhere. So did women. They didn't wear slacks or pants or anything like that. And I got my first pair of what I call jeans.
Yeah.
You couldn't wear them to school.
Were
You
they
couldn't-
blue?
Yeah, they were blue, but
Okay.
they had like record player and people dancing pictures on the jeans.
Oh, okay.
But we could only wear them after school. And I think it was after I was 8, so then the war was over, and Katharine Hepburn wore men's trousers in the movies, and women were in the service and they wore uniforms, and then they started to make slacks for women to wear.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So that
Yeah.
was kind of coming. That was, what year was that? Or what decade was that? Did you
That
say
was
the
like
50s?
45, yeah, between 45 and 50.
Oh, okay.
But in the winter, we did have snow pants. So the girls kept warm with snow pants.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I remember growing up, they were called hot pants.
Oh, okay. There you go, Mark.
All right. But so much for that. That was during my sister parties in the basement, but that's for another podcast.
And we had minstrel shows back then. That was fun too. But I wanted to get back to the movies. Do you know what minstrel shows were?
No, I do not.
Oh, yeah. Some of
Do you,
the
do you
people-
know?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
because I
okay.
was in the minstrels.
Oh,
Yeah, we would have practice, and it was fun. And we used the Roscoe Theater. We had the show for 2 nights, but people directed it. Well, then I played my accordion, so I would open the show and
Oh,
close
really?
the show with a patriotic hymn.
oh,
Yeah.
wow. Nice.
And Mr. Cairns would come with his car and take me, and I wore a gown.
Ah,
And I was
it's funny you didn't want to teach that when you got into teaching.
teach the
Music.
accordion. Oh.
Or just music in general. Did that
No.
interest you or no? Just,
Well, see, I always wanted to play the piano.
oh,
But my uncle was an accordion teacher, and he had a studio in Charleroi, and I had to ride a streetcar to my lesson. So my mother didn't want to buy a piano, but that's what I wanted because of my uncle. So I played the accordion, and I never wanted to.
Oh,
but
geez.
I played it every day, and
So you practiced?
Yeah, I practiced. I did what I was supposed to do.
But you practiced piano too, right?
I could.
No?
I could just play with one hand on the
okay.
piano. Yeah, but where was I going with that? Oh, I was going to tell about. I was still wanting to get back to the movies though. How people depended on that weekly news, and then we would have a cartoon, and then the main show. And in the summer, when I got to be about 12, my girlfriend and I, we would go. They changed the movie every 2 nights, so we would go to the movies like 4 times a week.
Let me ask you, how much did it cost to go to the movies?
I think 35 cents.
35 cents. Wow, that's a blast from the past. If it only cost that much now.
Yeah, right.
I go to the $5 nights on Tuesdays, but the sodas are $7 and the popcorn's $8. So
is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so.
I think even when you go on a weekend, you pay more for what you buy to eat, drink than
Absolutely.
you do for the movie ticket.
Absolutely.
Oh, goodness. Well, this has been fun. Oh, and we rode to Kennywood on the train. Let me see. I think we covered almost everything. I liked that most people were. It was nice growing up then.
Well, that's good. So, so you were happy growing up. Now, that kind of seems to me like it was the Valley. Like you had a bunch of different cities around you. So you had Roscoe, Stockdale. You had California, right?
Yes.
Elko, was that part of it too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and you had probably a fire hall in each city, right? Which within blocks, I would say, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. How are the sock hops? How are the sock hops, the firehouse dances and stuff? Did you used to go to those?
Oh, yeah, I used to go. It was fun. It was in that Sokol Club because that's where a lot of people had their weddings. They had a dance hall upstairs. Yeah. They had the club downstairs. And I always went in there to collect for the paper. And everybody was really nice, but that was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But our dances were in the evening, and a couple women would chaperone. And we had the most fun. There were maybe, I don't know, I'd say maybe most under 20 people that came.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I like that you remember it so vividly. You know, I mean, this was, 60, 70 years ago. So you remember it so vividly. I do remember my dad, who's in his 80s now. I always hear stories from him, working at the mill, the midnight shift, coming into like the Sokol's Club or the bars like at 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, because to them, that was the afternoon. They worked all night. They want to get breakfast and they want to have a drink before they go home and go to sleep.
And you're right. And that's what they did. And the hot days in the summer, I mean, it was hot in the summer. It was cold in the winter in the mill.
So did they all walk to work, or they'd have their lunch pail?
Yes, you're right. The lunch pail. And then they would stop at Savage's or Carvallis's or the Sokol Club. But then Roscoe had the Dutch Club. They had, I think, 3 bars in Roscoe. Oh. But my brother was delivering the papers one day at the bar that was close to the mill. And these men were having a fight. Oh. And the guy pulled out his gun. And I don't know, I can't remember exactly whether he shot the guy. He must have shot him in the arm or something. So then they had a trial. And my brother he was subpoenaed to go to court.
Where was that? Yeah. Was that?
Washington
County Courthouse?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
he had to go there and say what he saw.
Yeah.
And he loved it.
Oh, yeah?
He wasn't nervous at all. No, he loved it.
Wow. Well, I was never a witness, but I sure liked being a juror. I remember years ago, we had a 3-day juror trial, and I really enjoyed it. But
now, how old were you?
Oh, gee, that was just maybe 10 years ago. So I was an adult doing that. So I enjoyed it just to get out of work. Just to get out of work. But, how old was your brother to go through that? I mean, that had to be pretty traumatic, I would think.
Yeah, he thought it was real important. He loved it. And I'll tell you, his grandson now, my brother's gone, but his grandson, Anthony, is just like him.
Oh, really?
Oh, my God.
You see a lot of him?
Yeah, he would have gone, too.
Oh, wow.
As the kind of person. But he was a really good brother for me because he was 3 years older. And
he watched you, take care of you.
Yeah,
you walked to school together.
Yeah, he was good, but he misbehaved. I didn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's too funny.
Yeah, we had a clock in the principal's room.
Yeah,
and he was held back because he had a reading problem. So it ended up that he was in 8th grade and I was in 7th, and we were in the same classroom.
Yeah.
And our teacher was the principal. Well, the teachers ate their lunch upstairs, or they had teachers' meetings, because we had 4 rooms, 4 teachers, 8 grades,
Okay.
2 grades in a room. So I know the principal, she knew that he did this, but she liked him so much. And they would go up for a teacher's meeting, and it would be like 11:30. And my brother would go out in the hall and bring the big stepladder in, and he would change the clock so that we would get out earlier to go for lunch.
So he forward the clock, what, 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes he did. And I'm over there shivering in my boots because I never did anything wrong. And everybady's like, "Yay, go ahead, Fuxie."
How ironic, and he was a school teacher.
Afterwards. Yeah, that's
figure
the best
that
part.
out. Yeah. At what point did you decide you wanted to be a teacher?
Oh, when we lived in that house on the riverbank,
Yeah.
there was a house up on the street, and there was a little boy. He was, I was in 2nd grade. He was in 1st, and he was having a reading problem. His mother asked me if I would tutor her son, and I was like, only in 2nd grade. So I did. She would bake cookies, and she would have a drink for me.
Wow.
And I would teach him his words.
Wow,
So
almost like getting paid in meatballs.
And I loved going up there. And they would wait for me on the porch, and I would. So that's when I started teaching.
Wow. Oh, my. Yeah, I always wondered about that. Because I think teachers, I think you have to have something in you. It's almost like a calling to be a teacher. I think when you're in education, you can't... you can't just half-ass it. You have to go, full throttle to be a teacher. You can't say, well, I want to do it, but then you don't. Mm-hmm. I think you have to get the most out of it is to be very passionate. And I think you are. I think you were a passionate teacher. Everything that I heard that, you gave it 110%. So,
and that's another thing too, Mark. Whenever I first started to teach up in Blainsburg, it was a little country town. And people would bring me flowers from their yard, and slice of apple pie for lunch, and baked buns, and give them to me to take home, and all that kind of stuff. And then even when I first came to Monessen, people were like that. But as the years went by, the women went to work, and the children got on a bus that went home, and you lost that contact.
Times changed, huh? Yeah, right. Times definitely changed. Each year, times changed.
Right. And people adjust, and we move on. But sometimes the good old days were pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Well, it sounds like you remember a lot of the good old days. I'll say that. You definitely have a good memory. That's a lot of good times to think back on. Now you have a lot of time to think since you're retired. I think that, you could always take a moment out of the day to go, wow, I really accomplished a lot, and I feel good about yourself. You feel good that you did good, coming from a small town, and then you went to teach at Monessen, which was probably a bigger town.
It was a city.
Yeah, it was a big, back then it was a big city.
It was.
Big city.
Really was.
Yeah.
And they paid more money. That's why I went.
Yeah. Of course.
And they had enough money to hire helpers, so you didn't have to do bus duty. You could have a whole hour to eat your lunch.
Yeah. So you drove Stockdale to Monessen every day? Mm-hmm. So you're able to buy a car. Mom bought you a car, or you bought yourself a car?
No, that was after we were married.
Oh,
As soon as I graduated college in 1958, then I also got married that summer. So when I started teaching, I was already married.
Oh, okay.
But
so you weren't student
graduated.
teaching. You were...
No, I had this job up at Blainsburg.
Oh, okay.
Well, then our first child came along, and you had to quit. Teachers weren't allowed to.
Tommy Joe.
Yeah. So
Tommy Joe,
I had to quit. And then that's when I got the job in Menneson.
Yeah.
After that.
Well, I think you were very blessed.
I think he was 9 years old or 9 months old, and I got the job in Menneson. But there was a catch there, Mark. My neighbor, where I lived, my mother, across the street from my mother, she was best friends with the president of the school board.
Oh,
there. So that helped.
That always helps for sure. But but I was getting to you were very blessed with 1 son and 2 daughters, right?
Yes.
Tommy Joe was the oldest.
Mm-hmm. And then I went back and I taught 4 years. Then Chris came along, so I had to quit. The job.
Oh boy.
And the next year, Kim came along.
Oh, then there was problems there.
And then I got rehired again in Menneson. Okay. I knew if I didn't do that, I wouldn't get back in because then they would hire younger people.
Oh, yeah. So you had to get back in there.
And I was fortunate that my mother and dad helped, and my mother-in-law and father-in-law helped until the kids got a little bit older. Yeah. And my mother-in-law belonged to ladies' clubs, and she had another son, so she really didn't need the help anymore. But it was a family affair.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah,
I mean, they were at our house for every holiday. We were really good to our parents because our parents helped us.
Yeah, I mean, you sound like a very tight-knit group back then. The family that, you probably had dinners together. You probably had holidays together, Christmas, Thanksgiving, everything. Vacations together.
Birthday parties.
Oh, birthday parties, yeah. So you go on and on. I'm sure if you view some of your home videos, the same people would be at every event there.
Were.
Oh, yeah.
And then we had summer picnics in our backyard because they were good to me. And that was nice, too. I was home all summer.
Yeah.
But the 2 fathers in the wintertime, they liked to always have one drink for the road. And sometimes we couldn't get them to go home. Oh. The kids were
then
in
it turned into 2
and
drinks.
The fathers were having one more drink for the road.
Oh, yeah. That's always a good time.
Yeah.
But, that's very good. I'm glad to hear all this stuff. It was really nice talking to you and getting some feedback from back in the day because, you always want to hear how it was before I was actually in the workforce. It's always good to hear how things progressed before I got in the workforce. So it was very nice to hear your stories. I
do want to say one more thing. It was like a lot of the fathers of the students I taught worked in the mill, but they had come from different parts of Europe or Africa. I'm not sure where else, but they were different nationalities and all. But they were intelligent people, but they never had the opportunity to go to college.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But a lot of their sons and daughters did. And the one family, the girl became an attorney. And a couple of the boys, I know they went into the scientific field. And the fathers, even my father, he never had an opportunity. And he worked in the mill because it was a good place to work. But he wanted to be a doctor himself.
Oh, really?
But he was a very good student, but he could only go up to 9th grade because he had to help his mother with the other children, and he had to get a job.
I think that's the way it was back then. I mean, you didn't have all the advantages that you have now. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't have to work just to go to school. They can just, live at home and go to school.
Right.
Back then you had to go to school and provide.
Oh, sure.
And then you have to decide, well, what's more important? Probably providing is more important. So I'm just going to bail on school and just keep providing for the family. So, I think that's good to cover and good to think about because not everyone knows about that. Everyone thinks the way we live now is the way it used to be, which isn't true. Mm-hmm. So, well, thanks, Jackie. I'm glad you're able to share all your stories.
And Mark, it was fun. I thought I wouldn't want to talk, but you just get me started.
Yeah, that's how it goes. That's what a broadcast is for.
And, I have to say that I like your podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. But that about wraps it up for Right on the Mark. See you next time. Don't forget to tap the bell, subscribe, and like.